Imagine lying down at night, with no blanket, no mattress, and no sturdy house to protect you. The world around you is silent, save for the crackling of fire and the distant howl of wolves.
No.
Snow falls endlessly, the wind cuts through every gap, and temperatures plummet to levels modern humans could barely imagine surviving. And yet our ancestors did not only survive, they slept through nights that would kill us today. How? How did humans sleep in the Ice Age without freezing to death? This question takes us back tens of thousands of years into an unforgiving world of ice, hunger, and predators. A world where simply making it through the night was a victory. In this journey, we'll explore the techniques, rituals, shelters, and adaptations that allowed humans to rest while surrounded by lethal cold. From caves warmed with fire to beds made of mammoth bones, from shamanic dream rituals to the invention of sewn fur garments, we'll uncover how humans managed to sleep through the deadliest nights of prehistory. And as you'll soon discover, Ice Age sleep wasn't simply about survival. It was also about community, about shared bodies and fires, about spiritual connections, and even about the very biology that shaped us as humans. To understand Ice Age sleep is to understand resilience, the stubborn will of humanity to dream even in a frozen world, the harsh reality of Ice Age nights. The Ice Age was not one moment in history, but a series of long glacial periods stretching back millions of years, with the most recent one peaking about 20,000 years ago. For humans living during these frozen ages, the night posed the most extreme danger. Daylight gave at least the chance to move, to hunt, to work, and keep warm. But when darkness fell, temperatures often plunged well below freezing. Sleeping could mean death if the cold reached deep into the body and shut it down. For early humans, the cold was relentless. Europe, Asia, and North America were covered by vast ice sheets, with snow lasting much of the year. Night temperatures could drop to levels that would make even Arctic explorers today shiver. Unlike us, they had no electric heaters, no insulated walls, no thermal blankets. Their only tools were fire, animal skins, caves, and the ingenuity of their communities. Every night was a test. If you had shelter, warmth, and companions, you might make it. If you lacked those things, if fire died, if predators approached, if you were alone, sleep could become your last act. In this way, sleep itself was not a given but a gamble. One miscalculation could cost a life. And yet Ice Age humans adapted. They created ways to manage the dangers of nightfall. By building fires, clustering together, and choosing their sleeping spots carefully, they transformed the deadliest hours into moments of restoration. Without this adaptation, humanity would never have survived. Ice Age nights forced our species to evolve cleverness, resilience, and creativity. Climate and conditions, the world they slept in. To understand Ice Age sleep, we must first understand the world in which it happened. The Earth was locked in a colder climate than we know today. Glaciers stretched down across continents, carving valleys and freezing rivers. Winters were long and merciless. Summers were brief, and in many places, snow lingered all year. Imagine waking each night under a sky lit not by cities, but by stars, and the shimmering glow of the aurora while frost settled over the land like a silver blanket. The wind was perhaps the greatest enemy of sleep. Even in a sheltered cave, drafts could find their way in, chilling bodies to the bone. Outside, sleeping unprotected was nearly impossible. Humans had to seek natural shelters, caves, overhangs, even hollowed-out trees, or build makeshift homes from mammoth bones, wood, and hides. Sleeping exposed on the ground was deadly. A barrier was always needed, whether moss, hay, or animal furs. The Ice Age was also noisy in its own way. Predators prowled at night, cave lions, hyenas, and wolves. To close your eyes meant risking being caught unaware. The cold and the fear of predators shaped the very rhythm of human sleep. Instead of long, uninterrupted rest, many likely slept in shifts, waking often to tend fires, watch for danger, or simply adjust against the freezing air. Thus, Ice Age nights weren't simply about comfort, they were about defense. Against the cold, against hunger, against predators. Sleep itself became a battlefield, and survival meant mastering its dangers. The daily struggle for warmth and shelter surviving an Ice Age day was difficult enough. But the transition to night was particularly brutal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, people prepared carefully. Firewood had to be gathered before night fell, fires had to be maintained constantly, and shelters had to be reinforced. Without preparation, there was no chance of surviving until morning. The process of preparing for sleep was often communal. In caves, groups would huddle around central fires, arranging themselves like spokes of a wheel so that everyone could benefit from the heat. Children and the elderly, being the most vulnerable, were often placed closest to the flames, while stronger adults endured the colder edges. Food was another weapon against the cold, as consuming fatty meat before bed provided extra warmth, as digestion fueled the body's temperature. Animal hides were not just used as clothing but spread out as insulation against the frozen ground. Sleeping directly on earth or stone drained heat too quickly, so humans layered grass, moss, or branches as a primitive mattress. Every evening was a ritual of defense, and every morning was a quiet triumph. To awaken in the Ice Age was to have beaten the night once more. Sleep was never guaranteed, it was earned. Why nighttime was the deadliest threat. For Ice Age humans, the hours of darkness were far more dangerous than the daylight. Daytime at least brought activity and the ability to move around, hunt, and gather resources. But when the sun fell, energy dwindled. The cold became unbearable, and visibility dropped to nearly nothing. It was during these hours that people were at their most vulnerable, not only to freezing, but also to predators. Lions, leopards, hyenas, and wolves often hunted in the dark, relying on senses sharper than humans could imagine. A human curled in sleep made for easy prey. This is why fires were so essential. Beyond warmth, fire was a guardian, its light and smoke keeping many predators at bay. Yet fire also demanded constant tending. If it went out, the entire group was suddenly defenseless. Another threat came from within, the human body itself. Without sufficient insulation, hypothermia could set in rapidly during sleep, lowering body temperature to fatal levels. Unlike today, where we imagine sleep as restful, Ice Age sleep was probably light and fragmented. People likely woke multiple times to check fire, shift position, or respond to noises. Thus, the act of sleeping was not restful in the way we think of it. It was survival disguised as rest. And the dangers of night shaped the very patterns of human behavior for thousands of years. Fire. The first weapon against the cold. Fire was humanity's greatest ally in the Ice Age, and nowhere was it more vital than at night. The discovery and control of fire allowed humans not only to cook food, but also to survive freezing nights that would otherwise kill them. A fire at the center of a cave or shelter was more than heat, it was life. Groups often organized their sleeping spaces around fire. Ashes from the previous night's fire could be banked to preserve embers, which were then coaxed back to flame before nightfall. In many archaeological sites, circles of charcoal and ash suggest that fires were carefully maintained throughout the night, sometimes with multiple small fires burning in a single cave. Fire also transformed the psychology of sleep. With fire nearby, humans felt safer not just from cold, but from predators lurking in the darkness. The flickering glow created a boundary between the human world and the dangerous night beyond. For many Ice Age people, fire was not only practical, but sacred. It was the eternal guardian, the thread of warmth that allowed the body to slip into dreams without fear of death. Without fire, Ice-aged humans could not have slept. And without sleep, they could not have survived. In this way, the mastery of fire was not just a technological milestone, it was the foundation of human resilience against the cold. Caves and rock shelters as natural beds for Ice-Age humans, caves were the closest thing to a permanent bedroom. Across Europe and Asia, limestone caves dotted the landscape, offering natural protection from wind, snow, and predators. The cave mouth was the gateway between the dangerous outside world and a controlled interior, where fires could be lit and bodies could rest. And inside, the rock walls stored heat, and the narrow openings made it easier to guard against threats. But caves were not always the cozy havens we imagine. They were damp, drafty, and often crowded with bats or larger predators who might have claimed the space before humans arrived. Early groups had to compete with cave lions, bears, and hyenas for access. When secured, though, caves became sanctuaries. Families arranged sleeping spots deeper within, using firelight to push back shadows and the smell of smoke to keep animals at bay. Archaeological evidence from sites like Chauvet and Lascaux reveals more than just art. Chit shows layers of ash, burnt bones, and bedding material. It suggests that Ice Age humans did not simply enter caves temporarily, but transformed them into seasonal homes. They laid down grasses and moss to soften the stone, covered themselves in skins, and circled tightly around hearths. Caves offered continuity. A family could return to the same shelter generation after generation, leaving behind traces of their sleep. To slip into slumber in a cave was to join a chain of ancestors who had survived in the very same darkness. It's mammoth bone huts and ingenious architecture. Not every group had the luxury of caves, especially on the open steppes of Eastern Europe and Siberia. Here, people created their own shelters, astonishing structures, built from the bones and tusks of mammoths. These huts, discovered in Ukraine and Russia, stand as some of the earliest examples of human architecture. Dating back nearly 20,000 years, the huts were circular, often more than 10 feet across, with walls formed from stacked mammoth bones and skulls. Tusks arched overhead, supporting roofs of hides, moss, and branches. Inside, fire pits glowed, filling the shelter with warmth. The bone walls themselves acted as insulation, trapping heat that would otherwise vanish into the vast frozen plains. Sleeping inside such a shelter must have been surreal, surrounded by the remains of the very creatures that sustained human life. The bones that once carried beasts across icy tundra now held up a ceiling above weary sleepers. These huts were not only survival tools but symbols of ingenuity, transforming death into life, cold into warmth. The existence of these huts shows that Ice Age humans were not merely passive survivors of nature. They were builders, architects, and creators of spaces uniquely adapted to their harsh environment. Each night within a mammoth hut was proof of humanity's power to reshape the frozen world. Snow huts and ice shelters, proto-igloos in regions where mammoths were scarce and caves absent, people turned to the very substance that surrounded them: snow and ice. Just as modern Inuit would later perfect the igloo, Ice Age humans discovered that compacted snow could be carved into insulating shelters. Snow, paradoxically, is one of the best protectors against extreme cold. Inside a snow hut, temperatures could rise to survivable levels, even when outside air was fatally frigid. Building such shelters required skill and speed. Snow blocks were cut, stacked in spirals, and sealed with slush. Openings were kept small, often tunneled to reduce heat loss. Within, fires burned, carefully, smoke venting through cracks, while heat clung to the curved walls. People could sleep in relative comfort, cocooned within the very element that threatened their lives. Sleeping in an ice shelter was different from sleeping in a cave or hut. The silence inside was profound, broken only by the crackling of fire or the breath of companions. The outside world disappeared, muffled by thick walls of snow. For some, this must have felt like sleeping in the womb of the earth itself, protected, enclosed, and separate from danger. These shelters also reveal adaptability. Humans were not tied to one method of survival. Wherever they traveled, forest, steppe, tundra, or mountain, they found ways to bend the environment to their needs, carving safe havens out of even the deadliest landscapes. Communal sleeping circles for shared warmth. Perhaps the most universal Ice Age survival strategy was also the simplest. People slept together. Body heat is one of the most powerful sources of warmth, and in a frozen world, no one wasted it. Families and clans likely arranged themselves in tight circles or lines. Children nestled between adults, everyone sharing in the collective warmth of the group. This arrangement was not only practical but deeply social. Sleep became a communal ritual, reinforcing bonds of trust and kinship. To lie down beside another was to acknowledge interdependence. Your warmth became their shield, and theirs became yours. In this way, every night reinforced the web of relationships that held Ice Age groups together. Evidence from burial sites shows that humans often placed the dead in similar sleeping positions, curled and clustered, as though returning to the eternal sleep of their ancestors. The symbolism suggests that even in death, the idea of shared warmth endured. Communal sleeping also altered the rhythm of the night. While some dozed, others stayed half awake, listening for predators or tending fires. Shifts of wakefulness meant that the group was never truly unguarded. This constant low-level vigilance made Ice Age nights less restful, but infinitely safer. In the circle, sleep was never solitary. It was a collective act of survival. Bedding of grass, moss, and animal skins. One of the greatest dangers of sleeping in the Ice Age was not the air itself, but the ground. Bare earth, stone, or ice pulled warmth from the body rapidly. To survive, people crafted primitive bed layers of grass, moss, leaves, and animal skins that insulated against the freezing ground. Archaeological sites in South Africa, dating back tens of thousands of years, show mats of grass deliberately laid for sleeping, some infused with insect-repelling plants. Over this base, animal hides were spread. Reindeer skins, wolf pelts, mammoth hides. The thick furs trapped heat close to the body, creating a soft and warm surface to rest upon. For groups with abundant resources, these beds could become elaborate, layered with multiple hides. For the poor, even a few tufts of moss might mean the difference between life and death. These beds also reveal something about comfort. Humans were not content merely to survive. They sought ways to ease their nights. Over time, bedding materials became part of the nightly ritual, carefully gathered, dried, and maintained. Skins had to be scraped and cured, grasses replaced regularly, and moss dried to avoid dampness. In this way, Ice Age humans invented the earliest mattresses. They transformed the hostile ground into a place of warmth and rest. To lie upon such a bed, wrapped in skins and surrounded by fire, was perhaps one of the few moments of genuine comfort in an otherwise brutal existence. Hearths at night, the constant flame the hearth, was the beating heart of an Ice Age camp. When the sun set and the temperature plummeted, the fire was not just a source of heat, it was survival itself. Archaeological evidence shows that many groups built their hearths in deliberate ways, stones arranged in rings to contain the flames, pits dug into the ground to hold embers, and even multiple hearths in a single cave, suggesting families shared warmth yet kept their own spaces. Night was defined by the rhythm of tending the fire. Someone always had to stay awake, feeding logs, branches, or dung to keep the flames alive. To let the hearth die out was not merely an inconvenience, it could mean death for everyone present. Sleep was thus intertwined with vigilance, half-dreams punctuated by the crackle of fire and the rustle of someone stoking it back to life. Hearths also gave light, transforming dark, hostile caves into familiar, almost domestic spaces. Children fell asleep watching sparks dance against stone ceilings. Elders whispered stories around the glow, and lovers stole moments of warmth beneath the shadows. Sleep near a hearth was never just about rest. It was about belonging to a fragile community bound together by fire. The archaeological remains blackened bones, layers of charcoal, by even burnt stones, cracked by repeated heat speak to this nightly ritual. Every fire pit was a memory of countless nights when fragile humans, wrapped in skins, clung to survival against the Ice Age cold. Smoke, sparks, and the risks of fire sleeping, but sleeping near fire came with dangers. Smoke-filled caves and shelters, irritating lungs and eyes, especially for children. Without proper ventilation, a smoldering hearth could choke its own keepers. Many Ice Age shelters show blackened ceilings, a reminder that their nights were clouded by the constant haze of burning fuel. There was also the risk of sparks. A stray ember could ignite bedding made of dry grasses or moss, forcing people to choose between warmth and danger. Archaeologists have found patches of scorched earth far larger than a hearth pit, hinting at fires that spread beyond control. Perhaps some families were forced to flee into the frozen night when their bedding caught flame, the balance between safety and survival turning against them in an instant. Yet these risks didn't stop them. Humans developed methods to reduce the dangers, keeping hearths small, layering stone slabs beneath fires to contain them, and learning to bank embers so they glowed through the night without flaring up. Smoke, fire, and danger were part of nightly life, an accepted cost for the warmth needed to live another day. The Ice Age sleeper did not drift into unconsciousness as we do today, sealed in clean bedrooms. Instead, they entered dreams with the acrid taste of smoke in their mouths and the constant awareness that their fire, both guardian and threat, had to be respected. Fire pits, torches, and stone lamps. Fire was not just a central hearth that traveled with people into the night. Excavations reveal portable fire pits and the use of torches, likely made from resin-coated sticks or twisted grasses dipped in fat. These torches provided light for those who ventured into caves, where paintings of animals and strange symbols suggest rituals that could not have happened in complete darkness. Stone lamps, carved from rock and filled with animal fat, are among the most fascinating artifacts of the Ice Age. Wick-like fibers would be lit, producing a steady low flame. Such lamps may have burned through the night, offering a dim, flickering glow inside shelters. Imagine lying down to sleep as a single flame trembled in the darkness, its light too weak to chase shadows but strong enough to reassure against the void. Light was more than utility, it was psychological protection. The night was filled with predators whose glowing eyes haunted the edges of vision. Even a small torch extended the boundary of safety, creating a circle of human presence in an otherwise inhuman world. For sleepers, that faint light could mean the difference between terror and rest. Thus, Ice Age nights were not entirely swallowed by blackness. Fire in many forms, blazing hearths, smoldering pits, flickering lamps pushed against the void, carving out fragile pockets of warmth and light where humans dared to dream. Charcoal and ash, hidden heating tricks over time. Humans learned subtle tricks with fire. Ashes, for example, were more than waste. They insulated glowing embers, keeping them alive for hours. In the morning, these embers could be revived into flame without striking sparks from stone. This trick allowed continuity of fire, ensuring warmth was never entirely lost. Charcoal, another discovery, burned longer and hotter than raw wood. Though its production required careful charring of wood in covered pits, it offered steady heat with less smoke ideal. For indoor shelters, archaeological evidence of charcoal residues in Ice Age sites suggests people understood its advantages well. These innovations turned fire into a reliable companion, one that did not demand constant feeding. Sleep became more secure when the hearth could be banked with ash, its warmth seeping through the night. Perhaps this allowed for longer stretches of true rest, when families could finally close their eyes without the nagging fear of flames dying out too soon. In this way, ash and charcoal's seemingly simple substances were quiet revolutions. They extended the endurance of fire, and by doing so, they extended the endurance of human sleep itself. The spiritual role of fire in dreams. Beyond warmth and light, fire carried a deeper meaning. To Ice Age people, flames were alive, dancing, consuming, breathing. Many scholars believe that fire had a spiritual role, linked to dreams, visions, and the boundary between life and death. Cave art often features flickering shadows created deliberately by torchlight, as though fire was part of the storytelling itself. For those who drifted into sleep by a hearth, dreams were likely shaped by the glow and crackle of flames. Some cultures may have seen dreams as messages carried in smoke, or visions born from firelight that played upon the walls. Shamans may have tended flames not only for survival but for spiritual journeys, where dream and waking blurred together. Fire thus became the companion of the unconscious. To sleep by fire was not just to survive the night, it was to enter a realm where the material and spiritual worlds mingled. Every ember was a watchful eye, every flame a reminder that even in slumber, one was never truly alone. This connection between fire and dreams may be humanity's oldest bedtime ritual. The same flames that kept predators at bay also carried the spark of myth, legend, and imagination into the dark hours of the Ice Age night. The revolution of sewing needles. The invention of the sewing needle was nothing less than a revolution. Before it, Ice Age humans could drape furs around themselves or tie skins crudely together with sinew. But this left gaps and drafts that could mean the difference between warmth and death. The needle, often made of bone, ivory, or antler, allowed clothing to be fitted, layered, and even waterproofed. Archaeologists have found some of these delicate tools dating back over 30,000 years, each worn smooth by the touch of a hand. They were more than tools. They were instruments of survival. Imagine a family gathered around a fire at night, the air outside howling with blizzards. A woman or elder bends over a hide, carefully piercing holes with the bone needle and threading animal sinew through. Each stitch was an act of defiance against the cold, an innovation that turned raw skin into wearable protection. The precision required meant that sewing became one of the earliest skilled crafts. Passed down through generations like a sacred duty, This wasn't just about fashion or comfort. Well-stitched clothes meant hunters could travel farther into the frozen tundra without risking frostbite. Children wrapped in stitched garments stood a greater chance of surviving the night. Even warriors wore reinforced seams to keep them insulated as they stood guard outside sleeping shelters. The needle shrank the world, allowing Ice Age humans to expand into territories that would otherwise have killed them. It's worth noting how symbolic this tool may have been. Needles were small, easy to carry, and often found buried alongside their owners. For many, they may have represented life itself, the ability to control the elements through craft. A single lost needle could spell disaster for a family, so they were guarded with as much care as a weapon. Some even decorated theirs, suggesting a deep emotional connection to this modest invention. The sewing needle was, in its own way, more powerful than the spear. Spears conquered animals, but needles conquered the cold. Without them, the very concept of Ice Age sleep, safe, insulated, and survivable, would have been impossible. Layering skins and fur as nightwear, once the needle made fitted clothing possible, Ice Age humans learned the art of layering. Unlike modern textiles, animal skins had natural properties. Fur trapped warm air, leather blocked wind, and softer hides provided comfort close to the skin. By stacking these in clever ways, people created something like prehistoric pajamas, specifically designed to endure the freezing dark of night. Think of it like this. The outer layer was often thick hide or leather, protecting against snow and wind even inside a cave or hut. The middle layer might be softer furs, such as reindeer or hare, chosen for their insulating qualities. The innermost layer, worn closest to the skin, was sometimes lighter and smoother to avoid chafing. Together, these layers formed a barrier that mimicked modern insulated jackets and sleeping gear. At night, these garments doubled as bedding. Families often lay together, fully dressed, with cloaks of extra hide spread over them. Children would be wrapped like swaddled bundles, nestled between adults to keep their tiny bodies from losing heat too quickly. In communal sleeping circles, the layers of clothing combined with shared warmth created a pocket of survivable temperature, even when the outside world dropped below freezing. Layering also reflected status. Hunters who brought back prized animals allowed their families to sleep in superior warmth. Tribes that accessed mammoth or bison hides could sleep better and longer than those relying on smaller animals. Clothing wasn't just survival, it was a form of wealth, security, and prestige in a world of scarcity. In the long silence of Ice Age nights, as the fire flickered low, a mother may have pulled an extra layer of fur over her child, whispering a prayer that they'd both live until morning. Clothing wasn't just protection, it was a blanket of love, a fragile shield against the endless winter. Sleeping bags made of hides. The concept of the sleeping bag, so common today in camping and mountaineering, is far older than we imagine. Ice Age humans essentially invented the first versions by stitching together hides into tubes or enveloping bundles, into which a person could crawl at night. These were far warmer than loose cloaks because they trapped body heat and sealed in warmth. Picture an Ice Age sleeper sliding into a cocoon of reindeer hides, with fur on the inside and leather on the outside. The fur lining acted like insulation, while the outer layer blocked drafts. These bags could be carried from place to place, rolled up, and unrolled when needed. They were not just bedding, they were portable warmth, essential for nomadic groups constantly on the move in search of food. Some were communal, designed to hold 2 or 3 people, allowing them to share warmth through close contact. Archaeological evidence suggests that large, stitched hide coverings were sometimes arranged over groups, functioning like early versions of family sleeping bags. When firelight danced across the cave walls, whole families may have huddled inside, their breath turning into mist as they whispered stories before drifting to sleep. Sleeping bags also had spiritual significance. The act of entering a hide bag was sometimes compared to returning to the womb or to the earth itself. For many, the sleeping bag was both a shelter and a symbolic cocoon, a nightly reminder of vulnerability, transformation, and rebirth upon waking. In the Ice Age, where one cold night could end a life, these hide cocoons were the closest thing to security. They turned the hostile environment into a place where humans could dream and dreaming. In such times was an act of profound survival. Waterproofing against snow and ice clothing and sleeping gear were only as useful as their ability to stay dry. Wet fur loses its insulating power, and damp skins could freeze solid, becoming as deadly as the cold itself. To combat this, Ice Age people discovered methods of waterproofing. Animal fat, bone marrow, and natural oils were rubbed into hides to create water-resistant coatings. This was not luxury, it was essential science born from necessity. Hunters returning from snowy landscapes needed to keep their clothing functional. By treating the leather with fat, they prevented snowmelt from soaking in. Furs stayed light and flexible instead of stiff and icy. At night, waterproof coverings were placed on the outer layers of bedding or sleeping bags, ensuring that rising heat inside didn't create condensation that froze against the surface. This waterproofing also helped with movement. Nomadic peoples had to travel long distances, often carrying their bedding and clothing with them. Dry hides were lighter and easier to transport. Families learned to maintain this system through daily ritual, scraping, rubbing, and drying hides by the fire before sleep, ensuring that their armor against the night was always ready. There may have even been experimentation with layering waterproof skins on the outside of shelters. A mammoth bone hut or snow shelter lined with treated hides would have been more resistant to melting ice dripping inside. For a family huddled within, that could mean one more night of safety. Waterproofing was the hidden ally of Ice Age sleep. It transformed skins from temporary coverings into long-lasting defenses, giving people the edge they needed to endure year after year of freezing nights. Ornament or insulation. Jewelry as cold gear. At first glance, the bone pendants, beads, and tusk ornaments found at Ice Age sites seem purely decorative. But scholars now believe many of these served a dual function, not only as status symbols, but also as practical insulation. Small bone discs sewn into clothing may have strengthened seams, while layered beads added extra thickness to garments. Even corded necklaces of hide or sinew helped protect the neck and chest from drafts. Some jewelry was deliberately made of materials that held heat. Amber, for example, warmed quickly against the skin and retained that warmth, a kind of natural heating stone. Shells strung together provided overlapping surfaces that trapped tiny layers of air, acting like primitive insulation. Ornament was, in this sense, survival disguised as beauty. There's also evidence that jewelry marked people as belonging to a group. In communal sleeping, knowing who was family or tribe could be vital, and ornaments may have acted like identifiers in dim firelight. Beyond that, they added psychological warmth. In a bleak and frozen world, the sparkle of beads or carved ivory may have comforted people, reminding them of human creativity amid hardship. Some of these adornments were sewn directly onto sleeping skins, not just clothing. Imagine a child drifting to sleep beneath a fur blanket decorated with polished beads, the little charms clicking together softly like a lullaby. Ornament was not always vanity. It was culture, identity, and insulation woven into survival. Thus, the Ice Age sleeper wasn't just wrapped in skins, they were wrapped in meaning. Each stitch, bead, and trinket was part of a larger system of protection, where beauty and survival were inseparable. Biological adaptations to cold the human body, while fragile compared to predators of the Ice Age, had subtle adaptations that helped it survive freezing nights. Populations living in extreme cold often developed stockier builds with shorter limbs. A phenomenon later described by scientists as Allen's rule. This meant that less surface area was exposed to the bitter cold, conserving precious heat. Over generations, these physical traits increased survival chances and shaped how communities endured long winters. But biological adaptation went beyond skeletal proportions. Some groups exhibited slightly thicker layers of subcutaneous fat, which offered insulation and energy reserves during food scarcity. The metabolic rates of Ice Age humans were likely higher, meaning their bodies burned calories rapidly to generate internal warmth. This relentless energy consumption forced them to eat enormous amounts of fat-rich foods, such as mammoth meat or marrow, simply to fuel their bodies through the night. Adaptation was also behavioral, tied closely to biology. Sleep was lighter, fragmented, and highly attuned to environmental threats. Snapping twig or distant growl could awaken a whole camp instantly, showing how their nervous systems were fine-tuned to danger. Unlike modern sleepers, Ice Age humans could not afford the luxury of deep, uninterrupted rest. Their bodies evolved to survive on shorter, more alert cycles. Interestingly, some scientists suggest that genetic adaptations from Ice Age ancestors still linger in modern populations today. Groups that historically lived in colder regions may retain better fat storage abilities or resistance to frostbite. What kept an Ice Age hunter alive in his fur cocoon might be faintly echoed in how our bodies still react to cold stress today. In short, the Ice Age reshaped not just clothing and shelters, but the very biology of the human body. Survival was written into bones, fat, and muscle, turning every sleeper into a living experiment of evolution. Fat, muscle, and thermoregulation. Fat was the secret weapon of Ice Age survival. Unlike muscle, which burned energy quickly, fat stored calories and acted as insulation against the bitter winds. Hunters often prized the fatty parts of animals' marrow, brains, and organ fats as much as or more than the meat itself. This wasn't indulgence. It was the fuel that kept their bodies generating heat as they lay through frigid nights. Muscle, however, was equally important. A strong muscular frame allowed hunters to haul heavy hides, chop wood, and fight predators, but it also produced heat during movement. After a day of labor, muscles radiated warmth, making the first hours of rest inside a shelter significantly more comfortable. Yet once stillness set in, it was the fat reserves that carried them through the long darkness. Thermoregulation, the body's ability to maintain a steady internal temperature, became the nightly battlefield. Cold stress triggered shivering, an automatic muscular contraction designed to generate heat. Children, with their smaller fat reserves, often shivered themselves to sleep, while adults shielded them with layers of furs. Even breathing had to be managed. Inhaling icy air too deeply could damage lungs, so people often covered their faces with hides or fur masks at night. It is likely that sleep was arranged around managing energy stores. Families who had eaten rich, fatty meals slept more soundly, while those who went to bed hungry risked hypothermia. Some archaeologists even speculate that sharing meals late in the evening, a communal feast before sleep, became ritualized as a survival tactic. Food, warmth, and rest were inseparable. The human body during the Ice Age was like a furnace that required constant fuel. Fat was the oil, muscle the engine, and fire the external support. Without this delicate balance, no amount of shelter or clothing could have saved them from freezing nights. Polyphasic sleep. Waking and sleeping in shifts, unlike our modern habit of sleeping in long, consolidated stretches. Ice Age humans likely practiced polyphasic sleep, sleeping in shorter bursts, broken up by periods of wakefulness. This wasn't just cultural, it was survival. The cold made deep, unbroken sleep dangerous. A fire could die down, predators could approach, or frost could creep into a shelter. Staying alert meant sleeping lightly, often in shifts. In many camps, adults likely rotated watch duty. One or two individuals remained awake to tend fires, check on children, and listen for danger, while others rested. After a few hours, roles switched. This created a rhythm where sleep was never entirely secure, but danger was reduced. Families may have dozed for 2 to 3 hours at a time, rising briefly before curling back under hides. Dream cycles were likely different too. With fragmented rest, Ice Age people may have slipped in and out of dream states more frequently. Their nights filled with vivid visions and half-waking experiences. Some anthropologists connect this to shamanic traditions, suggesting that the pattern of broken sleep fed into spiritual practices of dream interpretation and night rituals. Polyphasic sleep also meant flexibility. During harsh blizzards, people might remain huddled and half-sleeping through long stretches of darkness, conserving energy. In calmer weather, they could afford deeper sleep. Their entire rest cycle was adaptable to the whims of the environment, unlike our rigid schedules today. Ultimately, Ice Age sleep was not about comfort, but vigilance. Rest came in fragments, woven together by necessity, producing a people who lived between waking and dreaming, constantly balancing the need to recover with the need to survive. Sex, reproduction. And warmth in the night. Sex during the Ice Age wasn't just about reproduction, it was also about survival. Physical intimacy generated warmth, creating microclimates of body heat within shelters. Couples huddling together under hides not only strengthened social bonds, but also literally kept each other alive during the coldest nights. This merging of survival and intimacy blurred the lines between necessity and desire. Reproduction itself was fraught with risk in the Ice Age. Women giving birth needed warmth, protection, and support from their community. Families may have adjusted sleeping arrangements to protect new mothers, ensuring they were surrounded by warmth in communal sleeping circles. Infants, so vulnerable to cold, were likely kept pressed against their mother's skin, wrapped tightly in furs, and never left alone at night. Sexual activity may have had ritual importance as well. Some fertility symbols found in Ice Age. Art voluptuous figurines carved from bone or ivory suggest that sexuality was celebrated as a force of life against the harsh backdrop of death and cold. To engage in sex was to reaffirm vitality, a defiant act in a world that seemed designed to extinguish it. But intimacy also came with practical benefits: reduced stress, promoted sleep, and reinforced bonds of trust within the group. In a world where survival depended on cooperation, the emotional closeness created by physical intimacy was as vital as the warmth it generated. When we imagine Ice Age nights, it's not just hunters wrapped in hides and children swaddled in fur. It is also couples pressing together, seeking warmth in each other, whispering softly in the dark, their survival tied not just to fire and fur, but to human closeness itself. Sleep deprivation and hallucinations in the Ice Age, despite all their efforts. Ice Age humans often failed to get enough sleep. Constant cold, danger, and hunger led to chronic sleep deprivation. The effects were not just physical, but psychological. Exhaustion could make hunters careless, mothers anxious, and children fragile. In extreme conditions, lack of rest led to hallucinations, blurring the line between dreams and waking reality. A man stumbling through a snowy night might see shapes in the darkness, mistaking shadows for predators. A woman half asleep while tending a fire might hear voices whispering from the flames. These hallucinations weren't simply delusions. They were born of a mind stretched thin by exhaustion and cold. Over time, such visions may have fed into myths and spiritual beliefs, with dreams and waking hallucinations blending into a single supernatural worldview. Communal living helped, but even in groups, true rest was rare. Children cried, fires smoked, winds howled through gaps in shelters. The brain, deprived of consistent deep sleep, entered altered states of consciousness more easily. Shamans may have interpreted these states as spiritual experiences, giving meaning to what was, in reality, the brain's desperate response to sleeplessness. Sleep deprivation also weakened the immune system, leaving groups vulnerable to illness. During particularly harsh winters, sleepless nights compounded hunger and cold, creating cycles of fatigue that were nearly impossible to escape. Survival sometimes meant pushing through delirium, forcing the body to function even when the mind faltered. In the Ice Age, sleep was never guaranteed, and the line between dream and waking was fragile. Hallucinations, visions, and exhaustion were not just side effects of survival, they became woven into the very fabric of Ice Age culture, shaping myths, rituals, and the stories whispered before dawn. Sleeping beside dogs and wolves long before the modern idea of a loyal household dog, Ice Age humans discovered the strange comfort of lying close to wolves. At first, these animals were feared predators, their howls echoing across the frozen tundra. But in time, a relationship formed. The earliest domesticated wolves' protodogs were not yet fully tame, but they lingered near camps, drawn by scraps and warmth. Humans soon realized that when a wolf lay nearby, the night felt safer. Its sharp ears and keen nose were like an alarm system against intruders. Sleeping beside wolves wasn't just about companionship, it was a survival pact. The bond was not free of risk. A hungry wolf might turn aggressive, and one poorly timed movement in the night could trigger a defensive snap. Yet the benefits outweighed the dangers. Archaeological finds suggest humans were burying dogs with them as early as 14,000 years ago, a sign that the bond had grown sacred. Some scholars even argue that humans may not have survived the harshest Ice Age nights without wolves keeping guard. To curl up beside one was to share body heat, exchange trust, and perhaps glimpse the earliest flicker of humanity's bond with animals. Over time, this bond shifted from practical to emotional. A wolf pup raised by hand became something more than a watchdog. It became a companion, licking the hands of its human family, pressing its body close on freezing nights. The first firelit nights shared with wolves shaped both species. Wolves evolved into dogs, and humans gained allies who shared their hearth. The domestication of firekeepers' early dogs The phrase firekeeper might sound strange, but early humans often gave dogs the role of guardians of flame. Fires needed constant attention. One ember neglected could mean waking up in the killing cold of night. While humans slept, dogs did not fully rest. They stirred at every sound, padded near the fire, even lay close enough to keep sparks alive with their movements. Some evidence suggests dogs were entrusted with sleeping positions nearest to the hearth, as their presence discouraged wild animals from creeping into the circle of warmth. This role elevated dogs beyond mere camp followers. They became partners in maintaining the rhythm of night. A child might be told to sleep near the dog, not only for warmth, but for protection against both cold and predators. In oral traditions, dogs began appearing as spiritual guardians creatures who walked between worlds, their howls echoing into the unseen. Dogs were not only guarding camps, they were guarding dreams. In some reconstructed Ice Age shelters, remains of dogs have been found near charred fire pits. This suggests they were integral to nightly life, their ashes mixing with the traces of human fire. Just as humans dreamed by the glow of flame, dogs too must have dozed with twitching ears and darting paws, their own dreams mingling with the crackle of embers. In this sense, they were co-dreamers of the Ice Age, guardians of both body and spirit, herds as heat, cattle, horses, and reindeer. Not all animals of the Ice Age were predators or companions. Some were walking furnaces. The reindeer, horses, and cattle moved in great herds, their bodies radiating warmth that early humans could exploit. Hunters and gatherers often camped near the edges of these herds, not only for food, but for warmth. The presence of 100 reindeer pressing close together could turn a glacial plain into a pocket of heat. At night, humans sometimes slept near the outer edges of these herds, sharing in the radiating warmth like tiny sparks clinging to a fire. In some oral traditions of Arctic peoples, herds were described as blankets of the earth. Sleeping near reindeer or cattle was risky. The animals could stampede if startled, trampling anyone in their path, yet the temptation of warmth made it worth the gamble. The hide of a freshly killed horse or bison was also an immediate heat source. To wrap oneself in the steaming skin of a newly hunted animal was to steal its warmth directly, though only briefly, as death's chill soon followed. This practice blurred the line between animal and human survival. Herds were not simply food on the hoof, they were living sources of warmth, protection, and ritual meaning. In some Ice Age burials, fragments of horse hide and reindeer antler were laid beside the dead, suggesting that even in the afterlife, humans imagined themselves needing the comfy and heat of these great herds, sleeping in skins freshly stripped from the hunt. Few things capture the brutality of Ice Age nights more vividly than the image of a hunter curling into the steaming hide of a freshly killed beast. To modern sensibilities, it sounds desperate, even grotesque, but for Ice Age humans, it was ingenious. After a kill, the animal's warmth lingered for hours. Slipping into the skin, often with blood still wet, provided a cocoon of heat in the freezing dark. Sometimes entire families sheltered under the hide of a mammoth or bison, its massive skin serving as both blanket and roof. The practice may have carried symbolic weight. By entering the skin of the slain beast, humans may have believed they were sharing in its spirit, taking its strength into themselves. Shamans might have encouraged hunters to dream within the hides of animals, letting visions come in the mingling of human and beast. These nights blurred the boundary between species, the human not merely killing the animal, but becoming it, even if only for a few hours of warmth. Over time, the practical became ritual. Some groups may have seen this as a form of rebirth, emerging from the skin of the animal at dawn, as though from a womb. Such nights were not just about surviving cold, but about entering a strange communion with the creatures of the Ice Age world. Bears, lions, and predators in the night. If dogs were allies and herds were heat, predators were the nightly terror. Bears prowled caves where humans tried to rest, sometimes leaving claw marks still visible on Ice Age walls. Lions bigger than modern African lions stalked the plains, their roars echoing through the darkness. Hyenas, packs of wolves, and saber-toothed cats haunted the edges of human firelight. To fall asleep was always to gamble that something stronger was not waiting in the dark. Bones were piled at cave entrances as warnings, fires were kept burning high, and dogs were placed at the perimeter to sound alarms. But there was no guarantee of safety. Many burial sites show evidence of predator attacks, bones gnawed, skeletons scattered. To be devoured in the night was not a rare fate. And yet humans did not only fear predators, they mythologized them. The cave lion became a godlike figure in Ice Age art, its image etched onto bone and painted on walls. To sleep with the roar of lions outside was not merely terror, it was a kind of awe, recognition of sharing the night with forces greater than oneself. For Ice Age humans, predators were reminders that sleep was never fully safe. The night belonged to both human and beast, and every dream flickered under the shadow of hungry eyes. Rituals before sleep, protecting the dreamer. For Ice Age humans, sleep was not merely rest. It was an entry into another realm, one fraught with dangers just as real as wolves or the freezing cold. To close one's eyes was to surrender to forces unseen, and so bedtime was often preceded by rituals designed to protect the dreamer. Families gathered before the fire to chant softly, mutter charms, or scatter ashes around the sleeping circle as a ward against spirits. Some would place carved bones or stones near their heads, small talismans believed to drive away evil dreams. Children in particular were thought to be vulnerable while asleep, their souls fragile and easily stolen by wandering spirits. Mothers may have traced symbols onto their children's foreheads with soot, believing it bound the soul to the body through the night. Hunters, on the other hand, carried tokens from their kill's antlers' claws, or fangs that they laid beside them as guardians. Sleep in this sense was a battlefield, and humans armed themselves with ritual before daring to enter it. Even something as simple as the placement of the body had ritual weight. Some groups may have slept with their feet toward the fire to burn away evil approaching from the darkness. Others aligned their heads toward certain directions, east for renewal, west for death, depending on their beliefs. These nightly habits reveal that for Ice Age humans, rituals before sleep were not luxuries. They were essential acts of survival in a world where the boundary between physical and spiritual threats was razor thin. Shamans, dreams, and visions of the cold shamans were the guides of Ice Age night, the interpreters of what happened when the body slept, but the mind wandered into realms unseen. Dreams were not dismissed as random images. They were messages from the spirit world, perhaps from ancestors, animals, or even the icy landscape itself. A hunter dreaming of a mammoth might see it as a sign of the next day's hunt, while a nightmare of falling through ice might be taken as a warning to avoid a certain path. Shamans played a central role in shaping how people understood their dreams. In the glow of morning fire, they listened to retellings, interpreting signs with ritual authority. Sometimes they prepared dream-inducing rites before sleep, chanting, drumming, or inhaling smoke from burning herbs. These practices heightened the dreamer's chances of entering a vision state, where guidance could be sought in the form of symbolic animals or spirits. The cold itself was thought to influence visions. Shivering bodies, half frozen in the night, often drifted into states of delirium. Shamans may have seen such altered states not as suffering but as doorways, the cold stripping away the barrier between this world and the spirit one. To suffer through the night, they argued, was to invite the wisdom of dreams. Thus, Ice Age sleep was not just biological, it was a nightly ritual of entering the sacred unknown. Amulets, charms, and spirit animals as protectors. Across Ice Age sites, archaeologists have found tiny pendants, beads, and carved figurines buried near sleeping places. These were not mere decorations, they were charms against the terrors of night. A tooth from a lion might grant courage, while a carved bird bone could carry the dreamer safely through the sky of sleep. Spirit animals were invoked not only in hunts but in slumber, where they acted as guardians of the soul. For children, charms were especially common. Beads sewn into their clothing, or small stones placed under their bedding, may have been intended to keep nightmares at bay. Adults carried more personalized tokens, often linked to their role in the group. A shaman's carved antler, a hunter's claw necklace, a mother's string of beads. These items did not just sit near the sleeper. They were believed to pulse with spiritual power, creating an invisible shield against unseen threats. Some Ice Age charms blur the line between ornament and tool. Pierced shells strung as necklaces glittered faintly in firelight, perhaps believed to confuse evil spirits or attract friendly ones. Others were shaped to represent animals, bears, horses, birds. In these charms we see the deep intertwining of belief, art, and survival. To sleep without them was to risk wandering unprotected into the treacherous realm of dreams. Death sleep, burial and hibernation myths, one of the most haunting beliefs of Ice Age humans, was the link between sleep and death. To close one's eyes in the freezing night was always to risk never opening them again. This reality gave rise to myths that treated sleep as a rehearsal for death. Burial practices from the period reflect this. Bodies often laid in positions similar to those of sleep. Curled on their sides, wrapped in skins, sometimes sprinkled with red ochre, as though to mimic the warmth of fire. Some myths likely imagine death as a form of eternal hibernation. Just as bears curled into caves and vanished from the living world for months, so too did the dead vanish into the earth. Sleep was a temporary descent into this same state, the soul leaving the body but returning at dawn. Shamans may have told their people that each night was a trial, each awakening a small victory against death's grasp. Hibernation myths also shaped how people approached survival. There may have been attempts to mimic animal hibernation in times of famine or extreme cold, with families deliberately slowing their activity, curling close together, and sleeping through weeks of hardship. Whether successful or not, these myths reveal how closely Ice Age people linked the cycles of sleep, death, and rebirth. The line between them was never clear. Ice Age dreams recorded in cave art, the mysterious paintings on Ice Age cave walls. Mammoths, lions, horses, and strange abstract shapes may not have been mere records of the hunt. Some researchers believe they were visual echoes of dreams. The half-human, half-animal figures that appear in places like Chauvet Cave suggest visions seen in altered states, perhaps born in the fragile hours between waking and sleeping. It is striking that many of these paintings are deep within caves, far from natural light. To enter these spaces with torches, surrounded by flickering shadows, was itself a dreamlike experience. Perhaps people painted not only to record but to re-enter their visions, turning caves into dream sanctuaries. Night after night, the dream world and waking world overlapped in such places. In this sense, Ice Age cave art can be read as the archaeology of sleep itself, not just of bodies, but of minds. Each painting a fragment of a dream retold in color and stone. To look at these images today is to peer through the flickering firelight of tens of thousands of years ago, into the dreams that haunted and inspired the Ice Age sleeper, the European Ice Age sleeper. Europe during the Ice Age was a land of glaciers, rolling tundra, and caves cut deep into limestone cliffs. Here, people adapted their sleep not only to the freezing nights, but also to the seasonal rhythms of long winters and brief summers. The most iconic image of the European Ice Age sleeper is inside the cave, sheltered beneath stone, surrounded by fire, animal skins, and the echoes of painted walls. But even within caves, the cold was unrelenting. Europeans padded their sleeping areas with moss, grasses, and pine needles, creating soft, insulating beds that lifted their bodies above the frozen ground. In communal settings, families slept huddled together, often arranged in semicircles around the fire. This was not only practical, but also cultural. Sleep was a shared experience, a nightly reaffirmation of bonds. Burial evidence suggests that people may have even slept in positions mirrored by how they buried their dead, curled tightly, wrapped in hides, as though every night was a rehearsal for eternity. Unlike in warmer regions, European Ice Age sleepers had to guard against condensation. A cave filled with people and fire would warm slightly, only for moisture to collect on stone walls and drip like icy rain through the night. This made bedding especially important, and likely led to traditions of layering multiple skins and periodically drying them by the hearth. European sleep was also deeply seasonal. In summer months, people likely slept in shorter bursts, using longer daylight hours for foraging and hunting. In winter, nights could stretch endlessly, forcing communities into polyphasic rhythms. Sleep for a while, wake to feed the fire, tell stories, then drift back into slumber. In this way, Europe's Ice Age sleepers lived in cycles of vigilance, comfort, and endurance, always balancing the need for warmth with the risk of predators or spiritual danger. Asia's frozen steppes and nomadic nights. Across Ice Age Asia stretched vast frozen steppes, treeless plains where winds swept unhindered for miles. Unlike Europe's cave-rich landscape, much of Asia demanded portable shelters and nomadic strategies. Here the sleeper's bed might be the open ground, shielded only by animal hides stretched across simple frames or weighted down with bones. The iconic mammoth bone huts of Siberia are a testament to how humans turned the raw materials of megafauna into architecture that doubled as sleeping chambers. Nomadic sleep meant constant adaptation. Families carried rolls of hide bedding with them, spreading them quickly in a new camp before nightfall. Fires were essential, often placed in shallow pits dug into the steppe soil, ringed with stones to hold heat. At night, people slept close to these fires, adding fuel in turns. The sound of the wind outside was constant, a reminder that to sleep too deeply was to risk smothering under snow or waking to find the fire dead. Sleeping in Asia's steppes also meant confronting herds. Reindeer, horses, and bison were not just food, but also warmth. Hunters likely slept near their tethered animals, using them as natural heat sources against the punishing wind. Some archaeologists suggest that animal dung itself may have been dried and burned, its lingering smoke surrounding sleepers in a haze that both insulated and deterred pests. The Asian sleeper lived in mobility, their nights dictated by migration routes and survival needs. In this way, the very act of sleep became nomadic, never rooted, always shifting, as fleeting as the herds they followed. Africa and the Ice Age, different cold, different sleep. While much of Europe and Asia froze, Africa during the Ice Age told a different story. It was not covered in glaciers, but experienced shifts in climate that created colder, drier conditions, particularly in North Africa. People here did not battle constant snow, but nights could still drop to dangerous lows, especially in deserts where daytime heat gave way to freezing darkness. Sleep, therefore, meant learning to navigate extreme contrasts. African Ice Age sleepers relied less on caves and more on open-air camps or rock shelters. Nights were spent around fires, but rather than being purely for warmth, fire also became a defense against nocturnal predators. Lions, hyenas, and leopards prowled the darkness. To sleep unprotected was to risk attack. As a result, groups often arranged sleeping circles, with men and women positioned strategically to guard children and supplies at the center. Bedding in Africa likely drew on local plants, reeds, grasses, and palm leaves woven into mats. These were lighter than European moss piles and easier to transport, but still provided insulation against the chill of desert sands. Archaeological evidence from South Africa suggests that people layered plant bedding with ash from fires, a clever trick that both deterred insects and insulated the body. Sleep in Africa's Ice Age, then, was less about enduring blizzards and more about balancing heat and cold, safety and exposure. It demanded vigilance against predators as much as against temperature, creating nights filled with watchfulness, ritual, and an intimate awareness of the environment. The Americas, first migrants facing Arctic nights. The peopling of the Americas during the Ice Age brought humans face to face with new and hostile climates. Migrants crossing the Bering Land Bridge entered lands of deep snow, ice sheets, and unrelenting Arctic winds. For these first settlers, sleep was perhaps the most perilous part of survival. Unlike in their ancestral homelands, they had to improvise quickly with whatever resources they found. Temporary shelters of hides stretched over wooden frames became the earliest prototypes of tents, protecting sleepers from snowdrifts. In the absence of large caves, people dug into the earth itself, creating semi-subterranean sleeping spaces. These pits, lined with grass and hides, trapped body heat effectively, creating miniature sanctuaries of warmth in a frozen world. Sleep was also a migration tool. Families learned to travel by day and rest in long watches by night, conserving firewood and preventing frostbite by huddling together, and the reliance on communal warmth was intense. Without it, individuals risked freezing within hours. Oral traditions may have reinforced this, stressing that no one should ever sleep alone, no matter how strong. By the time Ice Age peoples spread further south into the Americas, climates softened, but the lessons of Arctic nights remained embedded in their survival strategies. The memory of those first freezing sleeps lingered in the culture, shaping myths, rituals, and the value placed on fire and community. The Arctic peoples and the dawn of the igloo. Nowhere was the art of sleeping in the cold more perfected than in the Arctic, where the ancestors of Inuit peoples developed structures that became legendary, igloos. Though the fully developed igloo belongs to later Arctic cultures, its roots likely trace back to Ice Age survival strategies. Snow, paradoxically, became the ultimate insulator. By cutting and stacking blocks of compact snow, humans created shelters warmer inside than the howling blizzard outside. The brilliance of the igloo lay in its control of air and heat. Inside, body warmth from just a few people could raise the temperature above freezing, a life-saving difference in a world where outside temperatures plunged below -40. Sleeping platforms raised off the icy floor, lined with furs, created a snug space where families could rest without freezing. The psychological effect of the igloo was just as important. Unlike flimsy tents or open fires, igloos created a solid, enclosed world that gave sleepers a sense of protection. To lie in such a space, listening to the muffled roar of the storm outside, must have been profoundly comforting in an otherwise hostile land. These innovations show how far Ice Age humans went to transform their nights from desperate endurance to crafted environments of survival. The Arctic sleeper, encased in snow and fur, demonstrates perhaps the pinnacle of Ice Age ingenuity. Turning the enemy ice itself into a shield that preserved life, fossilized bedding, and ancient sleep sites, Ice Age humans had to survive nights that were not just dark, but deadly. One of the clearest glimpses we have comes from fossilized bedding discovered in caves across Europe and Africa. These early beds were layered with grass, leaves, moss, and later furs from hunted animals. Each layer was carefully arranged, demonstrating that sleeping was a conscious act of survival, not mere rest. Interestingly, some beds contained herbs like camphor or other fragrant plants. These weren't for luxury. They served as natural repellents against parasites like lice and fleas. A well-prepared sleeping mat might smell pleasant, but it was also a barrier against disease and discomfort, showing an early understanding of hygiene. Archaeologists also found evidence of bedding being burned. Periodic fires inside caves were not always for cooking. Burning old bedding removed pests and sterilized the sleeping area. In effect, Ice Age people combined fire and bedding to create safer, more comfortable nights. The placement of bedding also suggests social organization. Families or small groups would claim sections of a cave, keeping children and elders close to the center for warmth, while others layered furs along the walls. Sleep became a combination of protection, social structure, and practical adaptation. Finally, some sites show repeated layering over decades. Generations returned to the same caves, building upon the work of ancestors. Archaeologists can read these strata like pages in a history book, revealing a culture deeply attuned to the necessities of nighttime survival. The mystery of charred bones in fire pits scattered across Ice Age campsites are fire pits filled with charred bones. Some belong to prey animals. Others suggest human activity. One possibility is that bones were deliberately used as fuel. Dried bones burned slowly and steadily, making them ideal for keeping a fire smoldering through freezing nights. Another layer of interpretation involves survival strategies. Marrow is calorie-rich, and bones could provide both nourishment and heat. Families may have roasted, consumed, and then added the remains to fires, combining food and warmth in a single ritual. Some archaeologists speculate that the placement of bones in fires had spiritual meaning. In an era where night was dangerous and mysterious, burning animal remains might have been part of rituals to protect sleepers from unseen forces. The juxtaposition of bones and fire also tells us about risk management. Maintaining fire at night was critical. Too little, and hypothermia could set in. Too much, and a cave could fill with smoke. Charred bones may represent the ingenious, if sometimes grisly, strategies early humans developed to survive the night. Finally, fire pits offer clues to social behavior. Groups shared the warmth of a single hearth, huddling close for heat and safety. Bones weren't just fuel, they were central to a system of survival that combined biology, technology, and social cohesion. Evidence of communal sleeping in caves. Evidence from caves in France, Spain, and Africa shows that Ice Age humans rarely slept alone. Bedding and hearths overlap, forming communal sleeping spaces. These arrangements weren't haphazard. They maximized warmth and minimized exposure to drafts. Children were likely placed between adults, using body heat to stay warm, while elders took positions along walls or near cave entrances, serving as sentinels. These sleeping arrangements reveal an intimate social structure where survival depended on both physical closeness and communal strategy. Seasonal habitation is apparent in many sites. Families returned to the same caves year after year, layering new bedding on old, forming a kind of sleeping palimpsest. This continuity indicates a memory of place and the passing of practical knowledge about how to survive cold nights. Caves themselves influenced sleeping patterns. Some chambers were chosen for their natural warmth, proximity to fresh water, or shelter from wind. Archaeologists have even found traces of carefully directed airflow and smoke control, suggesting that sleeping arrangements were sophisticated adaptations to environmental conditions. The evidence shows that communal sleeping was a survival strategy, a cultural practice, and a form of early engineering, all intertwined in the nightly rituals of Ice Age life. Sleeping positions and burial sites. Burials from the Ice Age offer clues about sleeping positions during life. Many skeletons are curled in the fetal position, which conserves body heat. Others were placed with furs or stones under their heads, resembling pillows. These positions suggest that the way humans slept was ingrained even in death. The fetal posture mirrors real sleeping habits. Without modern insulation, curling up was essential to maintain warmth. Burial positions may have been both practical and symbolic, reflecting beliefs about life, death, and the dreaming state that connected the two. Some graves include remnants of bedding or plant matter, implying that humans were wrapped in familiar sleeping environments even in death. Archaeologists speculate that this could also have ritual significance, preparing the deceased for a night's journey into the afterlife. In other cases, skeletons were positioned near fire remains or hearths, reinforcing the centrality of warmth. Fire was not only a tool for survival, but also a spiritual and emotional anchor, bridging life and death. Finally, burial evidence highlights the cultural transmission of sleep habits. Positions, bedding types, and fire placement all suggest that generations taught and preserved knowledge about surviving the deadly Ice Age nights. Archaeologists reconstructing Ice Age nights. Modern archaeologists and experimental anthropologists try to reconstruct Ice Age sleeping conditions. They spend nights in caves with replicated bedding, furs, and controlled fires. These experiments reveal just how difficult sleep could be. Smoky nights, cold drafts, and constant vigilance against hypothermia or predators. Fire management emerges as critical. The placement of hearths, type of fuel, and layering of coals could mean the difference between a tolerable night and life-threatening cold. Bedding made from moss, grass, and furs provides surprising comfort, but only if maintained and replaced regularly. Human social structures also come to light. Close huddling for warmth, alternating positions to share heat, and sleeping in shifts all demonstrate adaptive strategies. Polyphasic sleep, waking and resting in cycles, may have been common to manage risk and guard the group. Even small details, like the use of aromatic herbs in bedding or strategic placement of animal skins, show that Ice Age humans approached sleep with careful planning and creativity. Nights were dangerous, but they were not left to chance. Through archaeology, we glimpse a nocturnal world of ingenuity, courage, and social cohesion. Sleep in the Ice Age was not passive. It was an active, deliberate, and communal survival practice. What Ice Age sleep teaches modern science. Modern scientists studying sleep patterns often look to Ice Age humans for insight into the origins of human circadian rhythms. Fossil evidence, sleep site reconstructions, and ethnographic parallels suggest that early humans were far more adaptable than we imagine. Polyphasic sleep, or segmented sleep, allowed humans to manage extreme cold, remain vigilant against predators, and optimize energy usage. Sleep in the Ice Age was not passive, it was strategic. Modern neuroscience has begun to understand the health benefits of alternating deep and light sleep cycles. Echoing ancient patterns, anthropologists suggest that our ancestors' fragmented sleep may have enhanced creativity, memory, and social cohesion, skills essential for survival in harsh environments. The study of Ice Age bedding also informs ergonomics. Grass, moss, and furs provided cushioning and insulation long before modern mattresses existed. Observing how these materials were layered teaches us about thermal regulation and pressure distribution, lessons surprisingly relevant to contemporary bedding technology. Even diet and sleep were intertwined. The high-fat, high-protein meals of Ice Age hunters provided energy for thermoregulation at night, revealing a deep connection between nutrition and nocturnal physiology. Today, nutritionists studied these links, highlighting how ancestral habits shaped human metabolism and sleep quality. Finally, Ice Age sleep reminds us that rest is environmental, social, and psychological. By examining these practices, scientists gain insights into circadian flexibility, environmental adaptation, human resilience, knowledge that could inform future sleep therapies, or even survival strategies in extreme climates. Survivals of Ice Age habits in indigenous peoples. Across the globe, many indigenous cultures still display echoes of Ice Age sleep strategies. Nomadic tribes in Siberia, the Arctic, and Africa use layered bedding, animal furs, and controlled fire placement to survive cold nights, mirroring the innovations of their distant ancestors. Communal sleeping remains a common strategy. Families huddle together, with children in the middle and adults around the perimeter, optimizing warmth and vigilance. Polyphasic sleep is observed in hunter-gatherer societies, where naps during the day compensate for fragmented night sleep, echoing ancient rhythms. Dietary strategies also persist. High-fat and protein-rich meals before nightfall help maintain body temperature during freezing nights. Indigenous knowledge of local plants for insulation, pest deterrence, or even mild sedatives preserves an ancestral understanding of sleep hygiene. Interestingly, the social and spiritual dimensions of sleep have survived. In many cultures, the act of sleep remains ritualized, often accompanied by prayers, protective charms, or communal storytelling, echoing the magical and mythic aspects of Ice Age nights. These living practices remind us that sleep is more than biological necessity. It is cultural, practical, and deeply intertwined with survival. Observing them allows modern humans to glimpse our ancient nocturnal heritage. The romantic myth of caveman nights' popular imagination often reduces Ice Age sleep to romanticize visions of cavemen sprawled carelessly beside a fire. Movies and documentaries emphasize ruggedness, ignoring the meticulous planning involved in every night's survival. In reality, Ice Age sleep was engineered, adaptive, and socially regulated. Caves were not just shelters, but laboratories of nocturnal innovation. Sleeping positions, bedding composition, fire placement, and even the timing of rest all reflect strategies honed over millennia. Far from lazy, wild nights, Ice Age humans practiced deliberate, intelligent, and culturally codified sleep. This mythologizing also distorts how we view human resilience. The perception of effortless survival undermines the true ingenuity and courage required to endure months of freezing temperatures, darkness, and predation. Understanding the reality enhances appreciation for human adaptability. Yet the myth persists, shaping literature, art, and media portrayals of prehistory. Recognizing this gap between imagination and evidence allows us to honor the complexity of Ice Age life, while appreciating the cultural narratives we've built around it. Finally, revisiting the romantic caveman lens encourages a more nuanced reflection. Humans have always engineered sleep to survive, innovate, and thrive long before modern comfort and technology existed. Comparing Ice Age sleep to modern insomnia, ironically, despite modern luxuries, many people today struggle with insomnia and disrupted sleep. Studying Ice Age sleep offers a stark contrast. Early humans slept in harsh environments, yet often achieved restorative rest. Thanks to communal support, structured routines, and environmental adaptation, fragmented sleep, once a survival necessity, now conflicts with rigid modern schedules. The polyphasic patterns of Ice Age humans suggest that our bodies may be better suited to segmented rest than continuous 8-hour sleep, highlighting a mismatch between biology and modern lifestyle. Environmental cues, like natural light and fire, were carefully leveraged to regulate circadian rhythms. Today, artificial light, screens, and climate-controlled rooms disrupt these rhythms, contributing to insomnia. Lessons from Ice Age nights emphasize alignment with natural cycles. Even psychological stress differs. Ice Age humans experienced real threats, yet communal sleeping and ritual mitigated fear. Modern stressors, while less immediately lethal, often erode sleep quality due to isolation, anxiety, and overstimulation. Understanding ancestral coping mechanisms may inspire new approaches to insomnia therapy. In short, comparing Ice Age sleep to contemporary habits uncovers lessons about rhythm, environment, sociality, and mindset, showing that true rest is as much about strategy as biology. Could we sleep like Ice Age humans today? Could a modern human survive Ice Age sleep patterns? Experimentation suggests we could, but only with preparation, adaptation, and a shift in mindset. Layered bedding, controlled fire or heat sources, communal arrangements, and awareness of circadian cues would be essential. Polyphasic sleep could enhance alertness and resilience, while mimicking natural environmental cues might restore circadian balance. Even sensory adaptation, becoming attuned to cold, dark, and silence, is achievable with gradual training. Spiritually, we might embrace ritual and mindfulness, echoing the shamanic and protective practices of our ancestors. Herbs, scents, and symbolic acts could reduce anxiety and foster restorative sleep. Modern humans could integrate these lessons without living in caves or hunting for survival, bridging ancestral wisdom and contemporary comfort. Ultimately, Ice Age sleep challenges us to rethink what rest truly means. It is not luxury, but survival, not passive, but deliberate, not solitary, but social. Adopting even fragments of these strategies could revolutionize how we approach sleep today. The story of human sleep is one of ingenuity, resilience, and adaptation. From frostbitten caves to communal hearths, our ancestors crafted nights of survival, comfort, and ritual in the face of unimaginable cold. They remind us that sleep is a powerful human tool for the body, mind, and community. As we navigate modern insomnia, artificial light, and overstimulation, the Ice Age blueprint offers lessons. Respect your environment, honor circadian rhythms, value social warmth, and approach sleep as an active strategic practice. If you want to truly understand human endurance, look to the dark, frozen nights of our ancestors. They survived, thrived, and left clues for us in bedding bones and fire pits, evidence of wisdom that still resonates today. Now, if you found this journey into Ice Age sleep fascinating, share it with someone curious about human history. Dive deeper into ancestral science, and consider experimenting with a night inspired by our Ice Age forebears. Sleep like a caveman, survive like a human, and see how our ancient strategies can transform the modern night.